Come on in.
Hi, Director Priest.
Oh, you there. Oh, yes, I remember you from last week. How are you this week, Frank?
I've just been feeling generally nauseous and a bit kind of infected. I don't know what could have caused that possibly.
Has anything new happened in your life or diet?
Yeah, I got a lot of kombucha delivered to me, the health drink.
From my many studies in the medical field, drinking kombucha is not so much a cause, but a symptom of a much worse affliction. Every week you come back, you think you've got something new, but it's all the same. It was PTASD, Paul Thomas Anderson syndrome disorder.
Right. So a syndrome obviously is a group of symptoms which consistently occur together or a condition characterized by a set of associated symptoms.
Yes.
And a disorder then is a state of confusion. So are those two words not perfunctory if they're put together?
Who's the doctor here?
The director.
Who's the doctor here?
Director.
Who's the director here?
Well, seemingly not you, because you don't even know your own job title.
I've had a very busy week.
That's right. And what do you recommend that would help?
I recommend a hearty dose of Magnolia.
No, that doesn't seem like it will help at all.
I mean, I'm not saying it will, but it's worth a try.
Let's fucking do it.
Yes.
Cut to the theme. Huh? What? Director DVD. We are here today. This is a professional start to the main content. So we are here today in the second episode of PTASD to talk about Paul Thomas Anderson's third feature film, Magnolia. And this is a film I would describe as having not one, but two terminally ill characters. And to be honest, no one else is really having any fun either.
Everyone is either miserable or tangentially miserable. An evening, essentially, just watching a bunch of characters go about their lives under the crushing weight of existence.
Pretty much. So Boogie Nights, I mean, we're probably going to compare them a lot throughout this, but Boogie Nights is the other side of the coin, maybe, to Magnolia. If Boogie Nights is about sex, then Magnolia, I'd say, is more about like gender and sexuality and relationships and stuff.
It's sort of like a bunch of different stories that interconnect. Pretty much, I think every story that you have has some sort of connection with parenthood in some manner. I'd say that was probably the main theme of the film.
It starts with this narration, which doesn't come back until right at the end, I don't think. And it's these three kind of stories, and they're all kind of examples of coincidence and how real life it's a cliche, but real life can often be stranger than fiction in a lot of ways. They are mostly true. I think the scuba man who ends up in a tree after being picked up by a plane, that's not true.
Patton Oswalt didn't die.
Patton Oswalt didn't, no. And that's a cool little cameo. You can tell he's kind of in that kind of alternative Los Angeles scene. So Amy Mann is obviously a part of that. And then there are sorts of cameos from comedians throughout it, which is quite cool.
So have you seen this before? Because I remember watching Magnolia, I reckon when I was like 17, 18. I remember watching that opening and getting very excited for the film. Throughout the rest of the film, watching it and being very unsure with what I was watching, and then finishing it and then deciding that I must have liked it a couple of days afterwards. And rewatching the film, I think I enjoyed it a bit more, but I think for the most part, I think that's kind of the same. I really like some of the ideas of it, but I think ultimately I found it a little bit lacking.
I think the whole core idea is like the universe doesn't owe you anything. Like there is no such thing as closure, really. Nothing is owed to you, nothing means anything. I get that as the core idea, but at the same time, like if you're committing 3 hours of your time to watching this film and money as well to buy it or rent it or whatever, then I think you are maybe owed a little more than you get, possibly. But
the stories in it are very intimate. They are very like slice of life. As you said, the characters don't really have any closure throughout the whole thing, and they don't really learn anything. I think it's like you were saying last week about he wants his characters to move one degree instead of like have a whole arc. You can really see that in these films. I think maybe if you're trying to do something like that, especially with the themes it's working with, it might be better to be a shorter film. It's such an epic. It goes on for so long, and there's all these characters all interconnected.
Yeah, I think like technically, like it looks beautiful, and I don't know if you saw that documentary documentary I sent you, but there are like they show how they shot all those like tracking shots with the dollies and like the steady cam following people, and it is literally like a massive trolley with like 3 people operating it and like turning it around corners and shit, and people ducking out the way. I think it's really cool to look at how it was made, and like the montages are amazing, like that montage right at the start to the cover of One Is the Loneliest Number, and it's cutting between all these people very quickly, and then there's a really creative use of like show don't tell when they zoom into his lungs and they show the cancer in there, and then there's like a little stick pointing to cancer on a medical whiteboard. It's very clever in like the language that it uses, like the language of film. And it's not a crowd pleaser. I wouldn't say that.
No, it's definitely not a crowd pleaser, but it is full of these wonderful little details. Like when they first do the shots of the kids' game show, there's someone in the audience holding up a quote of Exodus, and that person gets thrown out of the audience. But that Exodus is the raining frogs thing that comes later.
How many letters does Magnolia have?
Magnolia. 8, 9.
8. And then what's the second letter of Magnolia?
A.
How many other times does A appear in the word Magnolia?
1 other time.
That's 2. 8-2. Exodus 8-2 is in the name of the film.
Whoa.
He didn't know about the Exodus thing when he was first writing it, and then obviously added in loads of details later and made it a central part. I mean, the whole point of the film is that coincidences happen more than you would expect. I think it is kind of cool that maybe stuff like that accidentally happened and now it seems like it was pre-planned.
Do you want to have a crack at the vague sort of plot?
We've got this guy on his deathbed, played by Jason Robards, Earl Partridge. His wife is Julianne Moore. And again, I think it's the same in Boogie Nights, where you don't quite get all the information to start with, and then it kind of builds up throughout. Make connections, and it's never like told to you. Like this fact that Claudia is like doing coke and like freaking out this whole film, it kind of seems like that's her whole life, but then you remember right at the start she gets this news that her father who molested her is dying, and so because you only get one day in the life of each of these characters, it does kind of show you that their life could be completely different, like the day after or the day before. So he's on his deathbed. His wife is a younger woman who's been cheating on him and is using his prescriptions to take all his drugs and kind of deprive him of the medicine that he needs, and she's feeling really torn up about this. She's starting to realize that she does actually love him, or at least maybe she's trying to justify it to herself.
Like she sort of now sees herself in this really negative light, and she can't deal with that, so she's taking all of his, well, at least she's taking it then. I don't know if she was taking it the whole time. At least in the last third of the film she takes all the stuff and then has to be taken off by ambulance, and we don't really know what happens to her after that. It falls apart because of the frogs, and we'll get to the frogs.
And she's given this kind of ultimatum at the start where this guy is basically on the route to death, and there are lots of like close-ups of his old dying face, which is pretty extreme.
He's really dying.
She's given the option of do I give him morphine and then he'll kind of lose his coherence and he won't be there anymore, but he will die quickly and painlessly, or you can keep dragging it out and he'll kind of be in and out, and you might get something resembling closure, but at the same time it'll probably just be a load of nonsense.
Rambling.
Brain kind of deteriorates. And we don't find this out until a bit later, but Tom Cruise plays this how would you describe the character Tom Cruise plays? It's the son of the dying man.
So he's essentially a pickup artist. I think Tom Cruise is the perfect casting for this. He essentially plays this really larger-than-life, slightly unhinged, creepy guy who's basically has a lot of problems with women, and he's trying to teach these sort of lonely men how to pick girls up at bars. And we sort of slowly learn that Tom Cruise isn't like this for no reason. There is some context. His mother had cancer and Earl abandoned him, Tom Cruise had to look after her. And
for the first maybe 2 hours of the film, all we get of him is this persona he's presenting to these men, and then the first time we start to see it crack is when he's in this interview, and this female reporter has obviously done lots of research on him and dug up all these secrets, a bit like Nardwuar,
uncannily like Nardwuar,
and she's revealing all this stuff that he maybe doesn't want to know, but she also kind of starts by lulling him into a sense of security and like asking him some basic questions and like feeding him praise to kind of lower his guard, and hits him with like the real shit. He kind of freaks out that someone could know this, and like the fact that he's exposed.
And he
kind of like interview gets interrupted by the phone call from Phillip Seymour Hoffman.
Phillip Seymour Hoffman, probably my favorite part of the film.
I'd say he's definitely playing against type. Would you say?
Yeah. I think he plays it really well. Like he just plays a very sort of sincere and genuinely really good person, not really coping with the situation that he was kind of thrust into.
And he's kind of introduced at first, you don't quite know what to make of him. And then you get the scene where he's like calling up that grocery delivery service and ordering porn, but you don't know enough about him at that point to know if he is actually ordering it so he can have a cheeky one or if he has other motives.
And then you find out
it comes and you find out that he's
for the number for Tom Cruise so that he can try and get him in touch with Earl and try and get some sort of closure for them both.
Yeah, so he starts off by talking to just a random kind of guy in a call center who's played by Paul F. Tompkins. Did you know that?
I did not know that name.
The voice of Mr. Peanut Butter and of Mr. Show fame. He's talking with him and kind of trying to sell him on this idea, and obviously he kind of thinks it's a hoax at first, increases, then he manages to get Phillip Seymour Hoffman. He plays a guy called Phil, and Luis Guzman is credited as playing Luis Guzman as well. It's just weird little touches, I guess. Obviously they were used in the previous film, so maybe there's that relationship there, so they can be a bit cheeky with how they're credited. He manages to get in touch with Tom Cruise. Does he actually get to talk to him at that point, or it's just like Tom Cruise has the choice of whether he can answer it or not, and then at the same time Julianne Moore comes back and they both kind of hang up at the same time and this connection is broken.
He mainly just talks to his secretary, kind of relays the information, and then he eventually goes off and actually talks to Phil, sees his father, and you kind of think that maybe there might be some sort of reconciliation, but Tom Cruise he's pissed, and he basically just sort of yells at his dad and says, "Oh, you left my mother, and you're an asshole."
But that scene is great because it opens up with this shot where Phillip Seymour Hoffman's opening the door and this guy like inexplicably has 4 dogs of different varieties. So he's opening the door and he's not quite sure whether he should let Tom Cruise in or not because Julianne Moore has a problem with him. So he's kind of keeping him hovering at the door like some kind of vampire. And then Tom Cruise is like, if those dogs get near me, I'm going to fucking drop kick them. Then he finally lets him inside the house, and he kind of needs a second because he doesn't want to confront his father right away. I think he has an idea in his head for how he wants it to go. He doesn't quite realize how gone his father is. So he's very much going into it thinking like, I'm going to go in and
altercation or something.
Yeah, I'm going to give him like what I've wanted to give him all these years, and I'm going to finally get closure. And he gets there and he slowly starts to realize that his father is basically like on his last legs, and
he's already gone at this point, really
understand what he's saying. And there are even a couple of lines where he's kind of like, wake up, and like, I know you're putting this on, like stop pretending to be like this. And you get this really cool shot. It's like there are like 3 layers to it. So there's the Jason Robards Earl Partridge in the front, and then Tom Cruise in the middle, and then Phillip Seymour Hoffman like standing in the background, and it's like soft focus, so Tom Cruise is really there and you can see everything, and then those two on the other extremes are really blurred out, so you're just focused on Tom Cruise, but you can also see Phillip Seymour Hoffman in the back kind of reacting and like basically having a breakdown because he's realizing
a massive breakdown. Technically Magnolia is a much more impressive film than Boogie Night. I think it's not as tightly written as Boogie Night, but definitely more unrelenting than Boogie Night, and also he was trying a lot more with Magnolia. It feels a lot more, slightly more experimental, at least where he's
slightly more experimental.
Well, much more experimental.
I mean, literally, like the first time we see Tom Cruise, or after the montage, the first time where we see him is to like the music from 2001, Zarathustra, and he's coming out with his arms out. That definitely seemed like a homage to Kubrick.
Well, that music's always like, I know it's not actually from 2001, but like it is from 2001 now.
To put that right at the start of the film, as you're kind of establishing Tom Cruise coming out with his arms out like Christ, it's a bold statement to open your film with, and he starts talking about like respect the cock and
tame the cunt,
just like the peak of toxic masculinity. And he talks a lot about this idea of getting out of the friend zone, which I don't think the friend zone is a real thing.
Seen a lot of this stuff with like pickup artists. I find it really interesting. There's like this weird culture where it's not even about sex, like it's about being wanted and desired, trying to like build up some sort of meaning within yourself.
It's very much like women are out to get you, and the only way that we can kind of show our superiority is like the dominant gender is to like conquer them, and there's definitely this idea that they're not really enjoying it that much, and it's something you're kind of doing for you. Maybe even like humiliation in a beautiful kind of you're demeaning them by subjecting them to your
they're not so great,
disgusting flesh stick.
A beautiful image.
And then there is a shot right at the start where Claudia Gator, who we'll talk about later, she gets picked up by one of these guys who is implied to be a disciple of Tom Cruise's, and we see them having sex, and it doesn't look like either of them are particularly enjoying it.
Clearly for both of them it's not about the sex. Like this guy wants to feel like a big man.
She just wants a kind of connection and some kind of company, really, I think. And then the next time we see her is when she wakes up and her father is at the door. So her father is Jimmy Gator, who's the quiz show host from later on, played by Philip Baker Hall, who's had a role in all the Paul Thomas Anderson films we've watched so far. And I think that has helped me see him differently as a character, like knowing the actor a bit more. I thought that was quite cool.
So he comes and he's like, so I've got cancer, I want to reconnect with you. And she's really standoffish and tells him to leave.
The first thing is that she's still asleep when he's ringing on the door. So this random like one night stand answers the door like in his pants. Yeah. And Jimmy Gator's like, is this your boyfriend? And he's like, no, I'm just a friend. But he kind of pretends that he's her boyfriend because he doesn't want to admit the fact that his daughter's sleeping with random women.
Yeah.
And so he comes in and it's a real invasion of privacy because she basically wakes up and he's standing like in her bedroom, like towering over her, which obviously with the context we get later on would be very shocking. Yeah.
She basically tells him to fuck off and go away. She never wants to see him. Later you find out that he may or may not have molested her. She thinks he has, but he can't remember.
I think from the way Philip Baker Hall acts it, at least, is supposed to be that he genuinely doesn't know or not. And whether that is because he's just completely in denial and he's blocked it out, or because his memory's failing, I'm not sure. But I think it's supposed to give a bit of ambiguity to that character. It's this idea that her problems are kind of self-created in a way, but just saying that the fact that she is in just this low place where she's so desperate and like lost of hope. She's just doing coke basically throughout the film, and like she keeps seeming like she's going to stop, and then she just does a fuck ton more coke. And yeah, so we'll talk about John C. Reilly's character then. So he plays this, I thought it was interesting that he's religious. I don't think you see a lot of like religious characters in film. And it's like a facet of his character, but it's not the main thing.
Yeah, it's very quiet religion. I guess it's how it would be if he actually is the cop who's religious. He doesn't really talk about it.
And again, it's show don't tell. In the opening montage, we see him kind of praying to a cross on his bedroom wall. So he's going about his day. The first thing he does is to respond to a call in that house.
It was a weird watch with, I don't want to date the podcast, but it was weird to watch with the current climate.
I mean, you won't date it because, Black Lives Matter and police brutality is something that's going to be relevant for a while.
Very true. I guess it's very zeitgeist right now. So it was slightly more uncomfortable, I suppose, than it would be to watch that scene where he's in there, and yes, the lady has done something wrong, but it's still very weird to watch. I don't want to read too much into that because I don't think it's very much the intention of the film, because he is just played as, for the most part, as quite a good cop, I would say, like a cop that's kind of lonely and maybe not the best cop in the world, but I feel like someone who's at least well-meaning.
He's like kind of the cliche of the one good cop, isn't he? And this idea that he has this duty and this service and these ideals to something bigger than himself. Yeah, so I think he's trying to do good throughout the film. So he finds this dead body in this woman's house, this little black kid. He does a rap twice in the film. Do you think that's supposed to be one of those things? Like, I tried to listen to the lyrics because he says, "I'm telling you he did it, I'm telling you he did it."
See, that's what I was literally just about to ask you, because I re-listened to it and I couldn't work out what he was talking about.
I'm not sure if scenes were cut or not, but I did do a bit of reading, and I think that boy's father is supposed to be the one who committed the crime, who killed the person right at the start. The Worm, is he called, or something?
Yeah.
So that guy killed him, but that's not really brought up a lot. Like, that's a very minor part of the film, just this murder that happens right at the start. And Paul Thomas Anderson loves that, yeah. I mean, the ultimate example of that is, of course, the frogs raining down at the end, which is like, there's no reason for that to happen. So John C. Reilly then kind of ignores this kid and then drives off, and that kid is the one who later on finds Julianne Moore's body passed out in the car from all the drugs.
And he takes some money from her, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He kind of checks if she's awake first, and he does call the police on her, so he does a good deed. And then I guess he's out for his own, so he does take the money as well. I can't really blame him for that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a difficult world.
And then he's sitting in the car doing this rap again as the ambulance pulls up and they save Julianne Moore. Oh, we don't know, actually. She could die.
But I think that is ambiguous.
Two characters called Jim. Two terminally ill old men. There are so many twos in this film, man. Exodus 8-2, am I right?
Coincidences, man. Coincidences on top of coincidences.
Well, some of them aren't coincidences. That's the thing. But I did read someone on IMDb trying to be like, hey, the number 2 crops up a lot in this film. Am I right? All these twos.
Am I right, fellas?
But yeah, we're talking about Officer Jim then. So he goes to Claudia's house, doesn't he?
He goes there and he's like, oh, could you turn the music down? And you can see
she's listening to Amy Mann, by the way. So it's this idea of like diegetic and adiegetic. Do you understand the film terms there, Callum?
I do understand the film terms. I understand the film terms. I've watched Red Letter Media.
Hey man, I learned that from film studies, so fuck you.
I never
They did actually.
studies.
That's the first time I heard of Magnolia. Is film studies teacher played the scene where they all sing the Amy Mann song at the end, and I thought, that's a really cool scene. I want to watch that film. So I think I watched it on like a break between like college periods or something. Like I went home and I had 3 hours before I had to get back to college, so I watched Magnolia in its entirety, kind of on one of those shitty streaming websites, and like I wasn't really fully into it, and I probably wasn't in the best mind state to be watching it, but I did. I remember watching a lot of like classic films in that time and not really getting any of them.
I feel like when you begin to watch those sort of films, I reckon I started watching classic 16, 17, around that sort of age at least. You need the context of watching a lot more.
Phillip Seymour Hoffman has that line later on where he's like, I know this is like that scene in the movie, but this is that scene in the movie kind of thing. So
that was too much for me.
That was a bit too meta. But yeah, it's that thing of you have to know the rules to break them. So if you hadn't seen a lot of films, I think this wouldn't like make as much sense to you as like to us fucking film nerds who love to sit around and just discuss like shots and stupid fucking movies.
What are you saying? What are you saying, Jack? What are you saying, Squire? What are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying? I don't know what he's saying. What are you saying? That's what he's saying! What are you saying? No, Joe. What are you saying? I'm saying only.
He leaves his gun, doesn't he?
Yeah, there's this weird kind of, it's this thing again where things seem like they're going to be bigger than they are, but there's a guy in like a hooded jacket who fires a shot, does he? And like John C. Reilly runs over to try and stop him, gets shot at, drops his gun in this kind of dense foresty place. And so it's this ultimate humiliation of like, for a police officer to get shot at and then just drop your gun and not be able to find it. And then obviously all the police force have to come over and look for it together, and they can't find it. They have this date in the end, and because she's
very coked up.
Yeah, she's very coked up, and she kind of starts it off and she's like, I don't want this to be like other first dates. I want us to be honest and put all our baggage on the table. She's obviously like thinking from her own perspective, but he tells her this story about him losing his gun, and she kind of realizes that he's a lot more moral than her, or like he's different. Like they're not the same kind of person, and there's the chemistry there. I think they could have worked as a relationship.
I don't think they could have worked at all. I felt that relationship was doomed from the moment it started.
There is that idea of like opposites attract, and you don't necessarily want to be in a relationship with someone who's exactly the same as you.
She was never completely honest with him as well. Like obviously
he's a very open and honest person, and she's very shut off. And then she says a line from an Amy Mann song. Whoa, Easter eggs.
Whoa.
She says, now that I've met you, would you object to never seeing me again? And walks out.
I'm not super familiar with Amy Mann, but I knew that one because I watched a little bit of the Charlie Rose interview for Magnolia. Paul Sanderson said that line was one of the main inspirations for the film to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about the production of it, Paul Thomas Anderson talks a bit in this documentary, which I guess we can link, about how he wrote the script in 2 weeks while he was staying at William H. Macy's cabin, and he saw a snake outside on like the first day, and then he was scared to go outside because of the snake, so it basically forced him to stay inside and write Magnolia without that snake, which again is biblical, isn't it? You know, it all connects.
It's a hard script to write in 2 weeks, I feel.
This is the bulk of it, so I imagine he at least got like a good draft of it. Yeah. And like The Room, another little Easter egg, The Room has lots of pictures of spoons right in the background.
It does.
And in Magnolia, there are just pictures of magnolias everywhere, like pretty much every location has a magnolia in it.
Did you find out that I wasn't sure? But do you know why it's called Magnolia?
I don't know if you know, but Magnolia has 8 letters, and the second letter of Magnolia is A, and then A appears twice in the word Magnolia. So Exodus 8:2, it all connects. Oh my god!
Oh my god!
So there is a boulevard in Los Angeles where the film takes place called Magnolia Boulevard.
Oh, okay.
It's apparently also similar to the term for a hypothetical region where things that fall from the sky come from.
Yes, I have heard this. Yes, like a ship gets lost at sea and then you find its anchor appearing in like a farm in Kansas.
So it's this idea of, again, like coincidences or weird happenings that do actually happen in real life. Should we talk a bit about William H. Macy's character? I mean, we're probably about halfway through the characters at this point.
Yeah, I think these are at least the last main people that's important. And so, like, one of the things that sort of structurally tells you that everything, all these things that are happening with the characters are actually happening at the same time, is the fact that there's this quiz show, which is basically a show where kids face off against adults to win money. William H. Macy was a former contestant of this when he was a kid, and he was considered a bit of a child prodigy, and he had the record longest running number of wins.
So William H. Macy is first introduced. We see like this horrible shot of like all this stuff in his mouth, and he's at an orthodontist and he's getting braces. That's like a David Foster Wallace thing that gives me anxiety, like anything to do with teeth or.
Well, I did feel. Well, we'll get into this more when we get into the frogs, but I felt that it's the most comic Paul Thomas Anderson I feel has been trying to make something that feels like a postmodern. Like I felt there was a lot, like just the way it's structured, and especially sort of the climax with the frogs, all of that. It felt late era Don DeLillo, or more aptly, Dave Foster Wallace's sort of short stories.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm kind of limited by, you're much more familiar with these guys than me, but the DeLillo book I have read that I thought was very similar to this was Underworld in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then obviously like there are a lot of Infinite Jest comparisons with all these like interlocking stories that are tied together by location and themes. They're like Little Prodigious Kid is a lot like Hal in Cadenzo in the way that he's memorized the Oxford Dictionary. And this kid has like a full knowledge of everything in the world. And then that kind of plays in later on. The whole point of William H. Macy's character to me was showing that like peaking so early and having this very specific knowledge that then isn't that useful for real life does not set you up well for a well-adjusted life.
And the worst part is like this new kid, he's only 2 wins away from breaking the record that William H. Macy had to begin with. So even that one point where he was the wonder kid, where it's like his knowledge actually did mean something, even if it was pretty limited and very long time ago, even that is kind of going now. And so he's stuck as this character who works in kind of this dead-end job.
And then his whole like reason for being employed there is because he is this local celebrity that people know, and like he's supposed to be this big attraction. And
but obviously so long ago that nobody cares anymore. Like no one cares. And
he gets a dressing down in one of the early scenes. So again, like the one scene characters, it's Alfred Molina again, Dr. Octopus himself, who's shouting at him. He's saying like, I need this much money to have braces. And he's like, your teeth are fine. You already owe me a shitload of money.
And then we later find out that he wants braces because he goes to this bar like after work or whatever, and there's this guy, this hunky Brad, who has braces. He has this weird delusion where in some sense that he also has braces. There'll be a connection there.
I think it's fair to say he is homosexual. Do you think he knows that, or do you think he's kind of still... I got the impression that he knew that. He's definitely not very experienced then in like, starting a homosexual relationship. And he kind of sits in the corner and you don't quite know what's going on. He orders like a Coke, and it's kind of like, why are you in a bar if you're just drinking a Coke? And then you see his eyes kind of drifting off, and you wonder, like, is he like checking out a waitress? Is he like watching the TV for this quiz show that he used to be on? And then we see this hunky bartender, as you described him. The thing that like makes this day different from the other days is that there's this kind of like elderly, theatrical, gay man. And I think he's literally got like the most on-the-nose name, like Thurston Howell or something. Like very kind of proper and like kind of camp, clearly very intelligent. Like he puts down William H. Macy a lot of times in very like snide, kind of jabby ways that are very effective.
His entire time he's very much in control of the situation. It's sort of having fun with William H. Macy because William H. Macy's mad at him, chatting to Brad maybe in a way that he wants to be able to do but can't.
And we keep cutting back and you get the impression that William H. Macy is getting drunker and drunker and drunker. Yeah. And this guy is like quietly getting drunker, but he's still very much in control of the situation. And then there's this point where he gets up and he does this big monologue where he's talking along with the TV, and they ask a question that he was asked like way back in the day. There's some great dialogue there. Like that's some of my best bits in the film. Best bits, favorite parts of the film.
Favorite parts.
That could be a segment, you know, Joe and Callum's best bits.
Is that your best bit?
Yeah, it's this quote where I wrote it down. He says, "I'm sick and I'm in love." And this guy goes, "You seem the sort of person who confuses the two." And he goes, "That's right. It's the first time you've been right. I confused the two and I don't care." And that leads to his breakdown where he does say what he's been thinking. I guess it's this whole idea of like being trapped in your adolescence because your peak was when you were a kid. So that is the kind of thing you do when you're like a teenager, isn't it? It's like stare at people you find attractive, like fantasize about going up and talking to them, but you never really do it. And if you did, it wouldn't be like it would be in your head anyway. So he says to Brad, like, "I'm in love with you." And and all that. And Brad kind of laughs it off because obviously he's not, like, the first time we see him, he's like flirting with a female patron at the bar. So he's like clearly not gay, straight man.
Then he goes to robs his store, but then of course the frogs rain down.
Well, the frogs actually start to come down right when it seems like you're maybe going to get some kind of closure and some of the storylines are going to intersect. Is when John C. Reilly is driving back from this date and he's really sad, and he like sees in his rearview mirror William H. Macy climbing up the pipe, because it's this whole thing. He goes in first and it's established he has like this key on like a bit of elastic earlier on. So he goes in. There's a really cool like POV shot from the safe where you're kind of looking out of the safe, and it's shot in this way where you can't see behind him. So the whole time you're really paranoid that he's going to get caught. But again, like classic Paul Thomas Anderson thing, it seems like he's going to get caught. He just doesn't get caught. The same song is playing in the car. I watched this with subtitles, which I think helped a lot. But every time he show him in the car, it says Dreams by Gabrielle. So either he's like got a mixtape that's just that one song over and over again, or like, I guess coincidence, it's on the radio every time we cut to him. But his key breaks off in the door because of this elastic, so he can't get back in to give the money back. He has this kind of sudden change of heart and he climbs up the other side. John C. Reilly sees him. You think for a second like maybe we'll get some kind of redemption for John C. Reilly. Maybe they'll have this honest heart to heart, which they kind of end up having. But he turns around and then the frogs start to fall.
When I first watched that, I actually just burst out laughing. I just found it very funny.
Is it supposed to be funny? I suppose.
I don't know. I don't think it's supposed to be funny. I think I was just very surprised.
It's a weird thing to happen. And we cut between all these characters. Again, it's this thing that kind of unites them. They're united earlier by the quiz show. Everyone's kind of got that on in the background. So it kind of is this way of showing they're all in the same time period, but in different locations, obviously. And then we see all these characters reacting to the frogs differently. My favorite one is probably Stanley, the quiz kid, who just looks up and he's like, this happens. This is a thing that happens. I thought that was
it's all okay.
People wildly theorizing on IMDb. They're like, oh, that means that Stanley is a prophet and he knew that was going to happen. And the idea is that kids have the best form, the truest form of intelligence, and Stanley's a prophet. Stanley's not a prophet.
Stanley is a broken child.
He has a horrible relationship with his father. Like, his father's trying to get auditions and stuff and doesn't really care or understand about him. He's just using him as a
proper way of making money. So the adults of the kids of the game show get sent off into this different room to watch, and he's even talking like ways of like subtly bringing them down in order to get them to keep working at a high level. Like, you've got to abuse them just a little bit. Stanley's arc culminates with him going to his father and being like, you can't treat me this way, and his dad's just like, go to bed. And like, what's going to change for Stanley, really? He can't do anything.
Yeah, I guess we don't know how the quiz show situation would be resolved. Like, Stanley's there with these two other children. They don't really contribute.
You never see them answer the question. I don't know if I guess they must do at some point.
They're looking at other things, like they're talking about like pilots and stuff they're going up for, and like they're working on other projects. Well, this is the only thing Stanley really has going for him in terms of show business.
Yeah,
and
he doesn't
watching
even really want it.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. Like, he just wants to learn facts and hang out, but everyone's trying to monetize him, which is sad. And watching the documentary, there's a bit with those three kids and you see like the real actors who played them. And it's really odd because they have the same dynamic, because they're playing child actors and then they're also child actors themselves. It's really odd. Like, that freaked me out a little bit.
So they have the same personality?
Well, you didn't really see a lot of them, but they're doing a dress rehearsal of the scene. But Paul Thomas Anderson, weirdly, is standing where Jimmy Gator would be standing and like kind of walking around and like monologuing at them. And as they're doing their lines, he's kind of like dancing around the room, and like he goes up to Stanley, like runs his hand along the desk like as he's doing it. And Stanley, the actor who plays Stanley, is kind of just trying not to notice, and it's a really odd thing. Like, he looks like he went crazy during the making of this film. Like, he is literally acting how Tom Cruise acts when he gets off stage and he's like in his pants, like contorting and like dancing about. That's how Paul Thomas Anderson seemed to be while making this film.
I always assumed him to be quite like a calm director, and I kind of just got that because obviously you have so many of these actors who come back again and again in the film, so I guess he must have some good relations.
He has his vision, and obviously you have a certain amount of days you can film, and this did go over by like 13 days, I think. So it was like 90 days and it should have been 77. So he is kind of going stir crazy in a way and trying to make sure he gets the best possible product. And it's this idea that because he's the director, everyone has to listen to him, and so no one can really tell him like, yo, just shut up, man, like let's just film this shit. Like, now that is a really good watch. I would recommend that to anyone listening. It's called This Moment moment, like an hour 20. So together it's like 4 hours 20. But it's sunken cost fallacy, isn't it? Really, that's how I'd describe Magnolia. And yeah, like Emperor's New Clothes a bit as well. Although I do think it is genuinely a very good film. And also, it's 3 hours long, but there is kind of like a coffee break halfway through, which is quite nice. So Claudia and John C. Reilly have some coffee, and Tom Cruise have some coffee. So just a chance to kind of calm down before you get to the real devastating parts in the last hour.
I'd say probably the most devastating part is the partly when they're all singing. I think that's definitely very devastating. And when you have Phillip Seymour Hoffman listening to the big monologue by a dying guy.
Earl Partridge.
Yeah, I feel Earl's monologue, was probably, to me, I felt was the most devastating part of the film. It's kind of coherent, but it's true that he's trying to say something, but it's not not super well articulated. You get this general sense that he's just trying to say and like get across what he's feeling, and this idea that he's made all these mistakes and he's been this horrible person.
The one line that really stuck with me is when he says, like, people say life is short and it's not. It's fucking long, bro. Direct quote.
That was very sad. I don't know how people actually die, but it felt like a very realistic in the sense where you're trying to say something, you don't really have the skills or like even the bodily function at that point to say anything that has real cohesion to it.
And I don't know if you know, but that actor did die like 2 years later of cancer. So
I did know that, yeah.
It makes it kind of extra like resonant and depressing, I suppose.
It's all too much, man.
It is all too much. But that's kind of what they're saying as well, isn't it? That the fact that we can feel these extreme emotions and stuff does really like hit you in the chest, and the fact that anything means anything is because we're all going to be Earl Partridge one day. If we're lucky, bro, we could have a much worse death than that.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's all too much.
So just give up. And that's what the Wise Up song meant to me in terms of the lyrics. It's very much like you can't go back. You kind of know and have come to terms with the fact you're going to die. So now just give up. Like, let yourself go loose in the river and try and have as much fun as possible.
That whole sort of idea of just give up thing, I think it's sort of acknowledgement that life is just really hard and that there aren't any big grand answers to anything, and everyone in the film is just trying to kind of hang on, either from their own doing or just from the world around them, just really falling apart, and they're just trying to get through the day. And acknowledgement that life is just very difficult.
Other themes on that would be like, how much of your life is automatic and how much is like, are you consciously trying to control your future? Because I think it's very easy to slip into a routine, and the whole idea of the film is that this is one day that is important and where everyone is realizing something or coming to terms with something or trying to achieve something, like one electric day in a sea of like gray nothingness.
Also, like, there's a sense of catharsis and levity out of it, of like just really existing in that day and accepting these really difficult emotions that happen to them. I suppose we can get to the frogs now a little bit. When the frogs did fall down, it does feel like the film sort of releases a little bit there. Like, there's so much tension in the film. Just emotionally, it's very heavy. There's a lot of stuff happening. When the frogs come down, yes, it means that some things aren't really resolved because everyone gets distracted by these frogs. I felt there was also this sense of real catharsis. There's a relief.
Yeah, no, in terms of story structure, I guess the whole point of this film is kind of defying traditional Hollywood narratives, but you do get this lowest point of where everyone's kind of dying, and at their lowest, saddest part. The return across the threshold is when the frogs start to rain, and it's kind of like maybe like an orgasm or something, like a sudden kind of breakthrough, and
exactly how I describe it. Sad orgasm of frogs.
A sad orgasm of frogs. That's the best way to describe this film, I suppose.
Basically it, yeah.
But there is also this sense that the characters, like the older characters, and Julianne Moore and the two old dying men have done a lot of fucked up shit, and that's why they are having such a rough time on their deathbed, or why they're resorting to addiction and stuff, is because they can't live with what they've done. So it's like it's easy to make mistakes, but it's hard to admit culpability and hold your head up and say, I want to be better, I want to be a better person. It's easier to just kind of keep slipping into a spiral of self-pity and destructive behavior.
And I think that sort of connects with the idea of like parenthood. All the parents they're kind of trapped in their own past. Like, they can try and be through with the past or try and resolve it. The past isn't through with them.
Whoa. Did you come up with that yourself? That's great.
I did not come up with that myself. I don't know who said that.
The book, as they say several times throughout the film.
Oh yeah, the book says the past is...
Did you realise you were directly quoting the film just then?
I did not actually know. I did not.
Okay.
I guess the film touched me. Yeah, so you can be done with the past, but the past isn't done with you. I thought I was being lucid, but I was just copying the film. Damn it, Joe.
So what else can we talk about? There's this part earlier on where Phillip Seymour Hoffman is on the phone and he's like trying to do the pills at the same time. He drops them on the floor, and then he's trying to stop the dogs from eating them, and he thinks he gets them all, and then we get a shot right at the end of this dog eating the pill, and then they kind of seem okay for most of the film. Like they're maybe whining a bit more and barking a bit more than usual.
So it was like one dog ate it, and then that dog is just much slower for the rest of the film. Like while the other dogs are barking, it's just sort of standing there.
And then there's just a cut to a dead dog later in the film without any kind of context or explanation. It's just like, here you go, just a little, like a dollop of extra sadness on top of the shit Sunday you've already had.
All dogs die, Joe. All dogs die.
Maybe I can use that as a transition because it seems kind of thematically relevant.
So I watched this with my girlfriend, and one thing that she was saying in the film is she felt all the female characters in the film were very hysterical, and their main sort of trait seemed to be screaming all the time.
I mean, there are two like main female characters, aren't there? And then maybe a lot of other supporting players. So you've got Claudia Gator, who's probably molested as a kid and has just been told her horrible molesting father is dying, so it's probably rightfully so that she's hysterical, but I agree it's not great for representation. And then Julianne Moore is kind of coming to terms with the fact that she's been horrible and cheated on this guy, and he's now dying, and she's not going to get any closure or be able to resolve any of that. She just has to live with all the shit she's done. So again, she is kind of rightfully so, and they're both on drugs for most of the movie as well, so
they are on a lot of drugs.
There's a cool scene though where she goes to the pharmacist. They're trying to honor her request, and they go over and they're making all these suspicious phone calls and giving her the side eye, and she freaks out and then has a little speech at the end of it.
You guys don't fucking know what's been happening with me.
And I guess the other female character would be the wife of Jimmy Gator as well, but she's not really in it that much.
No.
And then what she does get to do later on is finding out that her husband molested a child. So again, all she gets to do really is to just freak out and be very emotional. And there's a really cool shot there where the taxi with Claudia Gator in the back of it like turns a corner, and then the camera kind of goes across the crossing, and it's her mother in the car there. And these idea like ships passing in the night, like these two characters
never really meet each other, but there's
she does come over later, but it's this whole idea of like missed connections, and if things were very slightly different, it would be a completely different story, and how much of our life is like a result of coincidence and how much is in our control. Another point Meg had as well was that this game show doesn't really happen, but I don't think there's such thing as like a live game show. Is that a real thing?
Yeah, I know that's not a thing. That's not like, there's no reason for it to be a thing.
Yeah, and then also this, I guess in America there is kind of a culture of like stuff like Jeopardy and like specific knowledge. Like that is a whole scene where there are people who will like do the circuit of all these really kind of specific knowledge game shows, but there's not really one where there are like kids versus adults, and then the adults are also kind of like dicks about it as well. Like,
I'm gonna fuck you up, kid. I think I saw one on like kids show at one, like on kids TV when I was a child.
Are you smarter than a 10-year-old? That's a thing, right?
It usually doesn't have as much stake.
Yeah, like they're making real like serious amounts of money, right? And that's another thing with American game shows. Like you look at Pointless or something in the UK, and it's like, oh, you can win $1,000 if you win. And in America, it's like, yeah, you can get probably about like 10K out of this if you're doing well, and then come back next week and do the whole thing again.
Pretty good racket, really, if you can do it.
I mean, arguably not for the people involved in terms of like the long-lasting trauma.
Not for Stanley.
It's this idea that he's in this Hollywood world where everything has to go a very specific way, especially on like live TV. And if one thing goes wrong, it's going to fuck the whole thing up. And he's really timid, so he's not able to kind of, when he needs to use the toilet, he should probably just get up and use it. And like, but he doesn't. And then it's this building thing. He mentions it first, and then it kind of is not mentioned for a while. And then he says it again in like the advert break, but there's not enough time. And then finally he pisses himself on live television, which is probably like an anxiety nightmare for me, at least, imagining that happening to me. There is that catharsis there where once you've pissed yourself and you are just sitting in your own piss, it's like, well, the damage is done, so I may as well just like,
I don't care anymore. This is like, I can do whatever. I'm Superman, man.
A more traditional film would have probably had him like piss himself and then realize that the way his peers look at him doesn't really matter, and like then go on to win the game show in an amazing feat of displaying his knowledge, but it doesn't really happen like that at all.
But instead he basically is like, I don't care. Like, so
there's this whole standoff where one of them them has to go to the front to do this final round, and it's really high stakes because the adults are winning by a huge amount by now, and the other two kids want Stanley to go, and Stanley's like, no, you pull your weight for a change, man. Like, I've pissed myself over here, I'm sad. Jimmy Gator's kind of looking at him, and then he has his heart attack, doesn't he? And then the whole show kind of grinds to a halt.
I think we've managed to cover the whole plot of the film somehow. I think we've done pretty good.
Not 4 paws and a big old heart. Yeah, I knew him before he could even bark. Broke my soul to put him down. Guess that's just what comes around. As it slips away, you look in his eyes. Yeah, I don't think he realized what was happening, what all this meant. 'Cause every dog is heaven sent. I said every dog is heaven sent. All dogs die. It's about mortality. That's a lot to life, and I think it's rather nice. The wells of love, they suck it up till they're grey from when they're pups. Darkness gone, it dissipates. There's just an object left in their place. We remember them until we don't. Their forgotten lives give me hope. That'll be all of us one day. And they didn't know they were here to stay. And they didn't know they were here to stay. All dogs die. I'm a pretty morbid guy. When I look them in the eye, these thoughts are my reply.
You're coming on next one.
It's a bridge, isn't it? I thought you were doing a bridge. Some sort of bridge. Whoa, what's this? Is this a bridge? Yeah. All dogs die. Kids burn die. And that's a lot to lie. And I think that's rather nice. All dogs die. Kids burn die. And that's a lot to lie. And I think that's rather nice.
Other stuff to talk about then. So Jimmy Gator, I think, is supposedly based on Paul Thomas Anderson's father.
Okay.
Who was involved in television. There is kind of some idea there, maybe to what extent is arguable, but the scenes with like the dying fathers and the sons reconnecting are kind of semi-autobiographical and semi-based in truth. Okay. Tom Cruise, definitely, that speech he makes at the end is at least to an extent improvised because the dialogue that was written didn't work quite as well.
Okay.
Phillip Seymour Hoffman hadn't heard that dialogue before, so he said that when he's reacting in that scene, he is reacting as himself, basically, to watching Tom Cruise have a nervous breakdown kind of thing.
Yeah.
And again, it's like how much of that is really true. If you think about, like, in terms of like shooting, you couldn't just have Tom Cruise ramble for 5 minutes when it's a really important scene for your movie, because you do need to have some kind of backup in case it all goes to shit.
In case it doesn't work, yeah.
That is a cool idea if that is true.
It's also like, it's one of my favorite performances I've seen Cruise do. I think he's pretty good in a lot of stuff. I think like Live, Die, Repeat was very good in. I liked him in the Mission Impossible films. I liked him in Eyes Wide Shut. Probably the most serious film I've seen him in. But this is the best acting I've seen Cruise do. I think he was very good at switching from this really manic energy, this real quiet, seething undertone thing.
And there's very much this idea that he's playing a character or persona, and there are like little moments where you see bits of humanity crack through. There's the bit after the interview where he has to go back up after learning that his father's dying and continue doing this really macho speech and it almost looks like he's breaking for a second. Like he slips up the word heinous. I think he says that wrong one time, and he's kind of saying like, get your blue booklet and I get your white booklet.
Yeah, he's like the blue booklet, he's already done that. That was the last time, so he's supposed to go to the white booklet, but he says it wrong.
So that's the first time we maybe see him a little phased and like thrown off step, but then he basically just recovers and does the rest of it fine.
He's a professional, he's a professional.
And again, like mythology behind the scenes, there's this idea that Tom Cruise loved Boogie Nights, and that's why he wanted to be in Magnolia.
Well, that's in the Charlie Rose interview, Paul Thomas Anderson says after Boogie Nights came out, Tom Cruise called him and said, "Oh, you've got to get me in your next film." And so Paul Thomas Anderson wrote characters specifically for Tom Cruise. Yeah,
and it's based on kind of playing against type from his character in Eyes Wide Shut, I think I read. Yeah. Just showing that he has this range. As you say, it's possibly the best Tom Cruise performance, I think. I did like Meg's point about how like pathetic fallacy is kind of the point of the film, but also like really beaten over your head by the end of it.
Yeah.
And this idea that the more intense the weather gets, the more intense the characters experience things. But yeah, come on now. And like all those rain shots are great, where it's like a car in the rain and like the camera's slowly zooming in. And that's the first time we see Tom Cruise really show any kind of emotion, I would say. It's like when he's singing that song in the car and you can hear like in his voice a little bit, there's something
that's just a great shot, that whole like sequence. Moments like that, because I think the film is very long and I think it's imperfect and I think it maybe is a little bit overwritten at times, but I think when you do have shots like that, you're like, no, this is actually a very good film. Technically and just with the performances, it does probably reach maybe a little bit higher than Boogie Nights, but overall Boogie Nights I think is still much stronger as a film. It's also, Boogie Nights is just fun and Magnolia isn't a fun film.
No, it's not at all. It's one of those films that you'd like put on your bucket list, like films you should watch before you die. Or as you die, I guess that might be extra significant.
I will not wish Magnolia when I die.
That would be quite symbolic, though, if he died like right before the Amy Mann Wise Up scene. When the frogs are falling, Stanley says, "This happens. This is something that happens." This has led to the speculation that Stanley is a prophet, allegorically akin to Moses, and that the slavery the film alludes to is the exploitation of children by adults. These father issues persist throughout the film, as seen in the abuse and neglect of Claudia, Frank, Donnie, Stanley, and Dixon.
True, then.
I don't know.
I don't think Stanley's a prophet.
Akin to Moses.
Stanley actually is Moses.
Whoa.
It's a retelling of the King of Egypt.
So the two final things we can do then is we could try and do the sequel pitch again. I don't know if you think that has legs or not.
It's your turn to do a sequel pitch.
Okay. And then finally, we should talk about where this ranks in Paul Thomas Anderson films we've watched so far. I'll give myself 2 minutes to try and come up with Magnolia 2.
I will pee while you do that.
Hey, you're a big time movie producer, aren't you? You missed a big shot.
I run this town.
I've got a movie idea that would suit a man of your caliber.
So does everyone else, Sunshine.
Please, I'm sure this elevator ride will take about 2 minutes, and in that time, can you just listen to me and hear my ideas, and maybe you might like what you hear.
I guess I have no choice.
Okay, so top floor, right? You're a big customer.
I only go to top floors. Even if I'm not meant to go there, I then walk down the stairs.
So, are you familiar with the film Magnolia?
I've seen it recently.
Oh, cool, because I am pitching Magnolia.
Go on.
We'll get all the big guys back, everyone who's not dead. Obviously, some of them are dead, and some of the characters are dead too. So Tom Cruise is back. I'm sure you can get him. Probably, I can't get him. You can get him. He's still playing Frank T.J. Mackey, but he's kind of aged out of his virility. He's got erectile dysfunction, and he runs an InfoWars-style YouTube show, which he gets Stanley on as a guest. Because remember Stanley, the kid from the first film?
I remember Stanley.
But that actor is actually now older, so he could play an older character in this film. Yeah. So he's become kind of a Greta Thunberg figure campaigning against climate change. And there's this big point where he's like rescuing a load of people, and he parts the seas so they can all evacuate. We're continuing with the biblical references. We're getting a little bit more on the nose, but I think like the original Magnolia didn't make a lot of money, did it? So let's make this one like a kind of a blockbuster and very like crowd pleasing, so that then it will make some money, right? Brilliant idea.
It makes sense.
Obviously, we've got all the other characters as well, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to tie in at this point, but we'll get Dr. Octopus back, and he can just play Dr. Octopus. We can't get Phillip Seymour Hoffman back unless we CGI him in like we did in the Hunger Games. Let's not do that because that's disrespectful and would look terrible. So William H. Macy is still about. He got together with Brad. Twist.
He got together with Brad.
And they live in a throuple with the elderly theatrical man and all hang out together and are having a great time. Until John C. Reilly responds to a police call there, and then we can tie into the current themes of police brutality, and he shoots all of them, and then that's the depressing element that we are missing from the first film.
You have to have a depressing element.
And then probably you could get some more characters in there as well. I've not really thought about them yet, but yeah, that's basically it.
I'm hiring you. You've got, I don't know what it is, kid, but you've got it.
Great. So $50 million and full creative control. Thank you.
Done.
Ding. Great. So we're at the top. Cool.
Magnolia didn't make money, it says. Budget usually doesn't take into account marketing, does it?
General rule of thumb is like doubling budget. So.
I wasn't sure if it was the same for these sorts of films.
Yeah, they would have put some money into marketing, right? Like maybe not quite as much as twice as much, but to be honest, if you are the people producing this film, I don't think you'd go into it expecting to make a shitload of money. No. Would you really? Like it's definitely more of a experimental film,
isn't it? Its box office was 48 million and it had a budget of 37 million, so it probably didn't make money because of marketing.
And it was released at Christmas, so what a lovely time to go and see Magnolia.
It's what you want.
It was right on the eve of the millennium, actually, December 17th, 1999. So people were probably freaking about Y2K and worried that the whole world was going to fall apart, looking for some kind of release, some kind of escape, and then you go and see Magnolia. You come out wanting to kill yourself. Oh yeah, we need to rank it, don't we? If we think about ranking this in the canon of Paul Thomas Anderson films we've seen so far, where would you put it?
I don't think it's super surprising. In between Hard Eight and Boogie Nights. The Hard Eight is still very much the worst film, then Magnolia, and then Boogie Nights. Now, I think maybe it's unfair because I think I would go to Magnolia for a different reason than I go for Boogie Nights. I'd watch Boogie Nights with friends for one, and I don't think Magnolia is a super like, oh, let's hang out and watch Magnolia.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very arbitrary scale we're measuring it on, but I would have to put the same as you, because Boogie Nights is just infinitely more fun and watchable, and Magnolia I think is important, and I think if you are interested in this kind of film, you should definitely check it out and watch it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely worth watching.
Especially if you don't know about the frogs, because that is just an insane twist to happen halfway through. I mean, how did Meg react to them? Did she know there were going to be frogs in this film?
She did not know there was going to be frogs. By this point, she had switched off from the film. She did not like it. When the frogs came, she was back in for a moment.
Yeah, I guess it's got that going for it. If you kind of checked out by the 2-hour mark, then you can look forward to some surprising frogs to cheer you up. I think it's a great character study. Performances are great. Technically, it looks and is put together incredibly. Those montages are excellent, like the first one with the cover of One, where it introduces all the characters, and then the Wise Up, where they're all singing along. I don't know if that has been done before or since, but definitely not a
widely used thing.
Yeah, and I think it obviously wouldn't work in a lot of films, but here it does work, and it's a really cool device. I don't know if Paul Thomas Anderson came up with that, or if it's not going to top Boogie Nights for me, I don't think.
No.
But it is better than Hard Eight.
Now we've got Punch Drunk Love to do, which I also think is actually very good.
Director Priest, I watched Magnolia.
How did you find it?
Very sad.
That is the thing. I was hoping to cry the PTASD out of you.
I don't think that worked though, so I'm self-diagnosing over here, but maybe something funny or happy might make my mood a bit better and cure my PTASD.
But I give you something that's kind of funny, but also kind of awkward, but at least maybe endearing, so it might be okay.
No, I've had enough of those, man.
You're going to watch Punch Drunk Love and you're going to like it.
Oh, so I got Adam Sandler in it. I loved him in Grown Ups 2.
If you love Grown Ups 2, if you love Jack and Jill, if you love Paul Blart Mall Cop, he wasn't in it, but he did produce it.
Pixels, right?
Pixels, yes, Pixels.
I loved Pixels. I think it's honestly my favourite film.
Well, if you love Pixels, you're going to love Punch Drunk Love.
Very excited.
He's got wacky antics. He goes to Hawaii, pretty classic.
But at least, come on, tell me it's not as long as Magnolia, because I don't think I can cope with another 3-hour film.
Oh, it's a cool 90 minutes. This is romantic comedy, 90 minutes, Adam Sandler. You're going to love it.
See you next week, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Or probably in a month, because I don't release these weekly, because there are like 4 different things and it's very complicated. I'm sorry.